The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
Obviously, we over budgeted last year. I hate to say that I was right, but I was right. So.
And I think that that's what we need to look at more, is trying to get back to what we used to be, where our churches and our families took care of each other instead of relying on the state.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
I take our constitutional rights, the constitutional rights of my constituents, very seriously.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
Mr. Speaker, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you boil this down, there is never any time that a parent's right to govern what their children see and what they're exposed to should ever be bypassed.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
We need to start making Idaho first. We need to start making America first.
We need to be protecting our First Amendment rights, not inventing ways to slowly chip away at them.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
Properly before the committee is House Bill 270, and we have three potential presenters, so whoever would like to come forward and speak, or two or three of you, that's fine. Just introduce yourselves and tell us about the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Skog and committee. My name is Jeff Cornelis. I represent District 12, which is basically half of Nampa. I would say the good half, if you'd indulge me. Good committee. Before us is our introduction, or excuse me, HB 270. House Bill 270 amends Idaho Code 1841-16 and clarifies the definitions of willful and lewdful indecent exposure. I first want to be clear that this bill is only addressing a few bad actors, not any specific person, race, gender, or event. This bill simply states that men and women need to have private parts covered while they're in public, and this bill modernizes that section of code. This was first brought to me by city officials, including the mayor, city council, law enforcement, following a pride event that was held in Nampa last year in one of our large parks, where there was people who were exposing themselves to all onlookers. Now imagine our biggest park in the city of Nampa is between two of the three entrances to the city and exits. So most people come and go around this park, and a park is filled with people looking like they're having fun. Imagine pulling in there with your children and seeing an event like this and seeing people doing what they were doing. So maybe to clarify that and to bring more light to this subject, I'd like to bring up Nampa City Councilman Sebastian Griffin, who was there and who has an experience that he'd just briefly like to share.
That would be fine. Mr. Griffin, or Councilman Griffin. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Thank you. Happy Tuesday, Chairman and representatives. My name is Sebastian Griffin. I have the great honor and privilege of serving on the Nampa City Council, representing District 6. I'm grateful to be here today. One of my favorite lines that I often hear legislators say is, House Bill so-and-so is a simple bill. Well, before you today is House Bill 270, a simple bill. Our intent and our goal here is to close the gap and the loophole that we currently have in Idaho Code Title 18, Section 4116. As the good representative from 12 had mentioned, this is the modernized code for today's day and age. What we have had before us is a couple instances and issues, and I'd like to share one first-hand experience, not hyperbole, that I had. I was attending an event in one of Nampa's best parks, Lakeview Park, and as I was looking out, I had noticed that there was a woman who was topless, exposing herself to a group of individuals, some of which were children. Shocked by this, I went over and saw a local Nampa police officer and said, why hasn't this individual been asked to either number one, cover up, or number two, leave? And to my surprise, the officer said, what that person's doing isn't illegal. And I was shocked. I said, women can go around the park topless now and expose themselves in public? And the officer said, no, women cannot, but men with breast enhancements can. That there is a man and claims to be a man. And that's why I bring the legislation forward. I reached out to Representative Cornelius. He's my representative, and he brought this to us. And I know we're going to have a lot of testimony today, so I want to get ahead of it and address a few comments that I'm sure will ease some concerns. Local police has stated, quote, this addition to the current law would assist us in the event that we come across someone who's exposing themselves in a manner that offends people, specifically hormonally or chemically altered breasts. The current law does not recognize this. There have been a few instances in the past where that has occurred and we've had no statutory authority to take action against someone exposing themselves, as the current law is somewhat outdated. Additionally, our local prosecutor's office states, we believe that we could enforce this new code where investigated circumstances comport with the described elements in the bill. Committee will likely hear testimony today that says this bill is targeting and even discriminating against a certain group of Idaho citizens or population. I would argue it does not. This targets bad actors in our community that have found a loophole within Idaho Code to take advantage and disrupt society. That's it. It's addressing out-of-date code for a modern time. We need to modernize our code to address issues of today's day and age. I'll stand for any questions that you might have. If not, I believe Representative Tanner would like to address a few things as well.
That would be okay. Representative Tanner, very briefly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Skog. For the record, I'm Steve Tanner, representative from District 13, which is basically the other half of Nampa. So the city of Nampa is well represented here today. I just want to add my voice to things that were said by Representative Cornelius and Councilman Griffin, that we are not after any group of people, that we're not targeting a group of people. We're not saying you cannot be of a certain kind of gender, but there's a certain behavior that was very, very offensive in public. And that's what we are doing with this bill. And as Councilman Griffin said, that this is old code that needs to be updated for modern times. This is a complicated issue, something that 10 years ago you would not even thought we needed to even talk about, but here we are. And so with that, I'll stand for any questions as well.
Right. Thank you. Council, as we often do when we have a lot of people here to testify, I'd like to defer questions until we've heard from everyone on testimony. Is there any objection to that? Okay, seeing none. First up to testify is Laura Volkert, followed by Randy Jackson. Welcome back, Laura.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Laura Volkert. I'm a resident of Boise, and I'm here to urge you to vote against House Bill 270. I find the lack of exceptions written into this bill concerning. This bill is extremely broad. It doesn't just include public event spaces. It also includes places of business and even private places where another person is present. That could exclude trans people from changing rooms in clothing stores, or breast cancer screening clinics, or all manner of areas of public life. The term products is also overly broad. Could this include pacifiers, Barbies, truck nuts, post-mastectomy breast forms? Perhaps you can think that someone wouldn't want to take offense to things like that, but people take offense at all kinds of things. I'm also concerned about the enforcement mechanism for this. Police officers are simply not equipped to tell the difference between a trans or genderqueer person with breasts that have been surgically or hormonally enhanced and a cisgender man who has long hair and is a little heavyset in the chestal region. It is unfair to both the community and to law enforcement officers to put them in this position. Once again, I urge you to vote no on House Bill 270. Thank you.
See no questions. Thank you for your testimony. Randy Jackson, followed by Misty Tolman. When you're ready, Mr. Jackson.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and representatives. I'm trying to understand why a woman or a man who has surgically enhanced breasts would insist on the need to appear topless at a public event. I understand that some would say breasts are natural, so it should not be a big deal. Well, genitalia would also be considered natural, so unless a person is advocating that we should all be allowed to go around completely nude in public, that argument doesn't make any sense. I can think of only two reasons why someone would want to appear topless in public. One is breastfeeding, and the other one is for sexual provocation, like what you see at a topless bar or strip club. Since men cannot breastfeed naturally, and women at some of these events are not breastfeeding, it leaves the conclusion that this isn't about what's natural, but what is sexually provocative. People realize this and express that realization when they intentionally attend an event in public park, knowing their actions will do two things. Number one, offend a majority and arouse a minority. Now, people have the right to do in private and private events what they want, but should they be allowed to do so publicly, even in public parks where children are present? And truthfully, why would a grown man want to appear in a sexually provocative manner in front of children? It must be an issue of consideration if even the event organizers are being reported that they will require no topless individuals this upcoming year. I'm in favor of this bill, not because it opposes a certain demographic of people. In truth, I don't want to see topless, sexually provocative people in front of kids at a straight pride event. However, I support it because I think it's important to set these boundaries for a moral and just society and for the protection of innocent children. I too, like Mr. Griffin, was there and saw these events in front of children, saw topless things in front of children, and it's definitely not something that we should have in our society. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, maybe questions? I have a question, kind of like you're all dancing around this a little bit. What did you actually see?
Myself, I saw a man with surgically enhanced breasts, topless, saw a woman completely topless, and some definitely sexual behaviors towards that as well. So.
And children were present?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, next up, Misty Tolman, followed by Mary Rucht.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Misty Deli-Carpini-Tolman. I'm here on behalf of Planned Parenthood Alliance advocates, and we stand in strong opposition to House Bill 270. At its core, this bill is vague, overbroad, and an unconstitutional expansion of Idaho's indecent exposure statute that raises serious legal, ethical, and enforcement concerns. While the proponents of this bill say that it's about public decency, the language of the bill tells a different story, one that threatens the rights, safety, and dignity of transgender individuals, LGBTQ communities, and anyone else whose appearance does not conform with gender norms. The language in this bill does not appear in any other indecent exposure laws, making it clear that this is about the LGBTQ community. This bill creates different rules for different bodies, which invites legal challenges on equal protection grounds. And who decides what is offensive? A police officer, a passerby? It also has wider reaching implications. If a woman has undergone a mastectomy and wears breast prosthetics, is she now subject to criminal prosecution? People convicted under this law could face as harsh or harsher punishments than some violent offenders for actions that are entirely nonviolent and rooted in subjective interpretation. The penalty is not just disproportionate, it is punitive, cruel, and polices identity rather than behavior. The emergency clause of this bill means it would be immediately effective upon passage, yet there is no public safety crisis requiring such urgency. Why are we rushing a law that could criminalize transgender people overnight? Idahoans deserve laws that are fair, constitutional, and applied equally to all people. HB 270 fails on all counts. I urge you to reject HB 270. Thank you.
Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Oh, one question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Tolman, so are you suggesting that the legislation is saying that if you identify, I guess we'll use the word transgender, that it only applies to that, and if biological man who identifies as a biological man decided to have implants, it wouldn't apply to him? Is the legislation not applying to him? Because I think I missed that, and if you could clarify that.
Sure. Chairman and Representative Ehart, most indecent exposure, I don't know why can't I say that term, laws focus on clear intent committed by anybody. However, if a cisgender man, a man who identifies with his sex assigned at birth, is walking shirtless in public, but a trans man who's had surgery could be arrested under this law, then this is inherently about identity, not behavior. It's not about nudity, it's about who is expressing that.
Follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
I think she conflated my question. To be clear, I'm talking about two men, a biological man who identifies as a man that had breast enhancements. Are you saying he would not be subjected, so to be clear, he would not be subjected to the laws that this bill would purport to lay down?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ehart, I think that that person would be subjected to those laws.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, Mary Ruck, followed by Natalie Jangula. This is a virtual testimony. Ready when you are.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Skog and committee members. My name is Mary Ruck, and I just stepped out of a meeting, and I'm speaking for myself in opposition to House Bill 270. If anyone is afraid they might see any of the body parts referenced in this bill anywhere in the state of Idaho, then don't go to those events that might include them. However, you should not only avoid drag shows and pride parades, which might be the impetus behind this effort, you should also avoid any high school proms or bars or fancy fundraisers, because you will no doubt be exposed to the female breast, original, enhanced, or even prosthetic or artificial. I have a few questions. Who is going to enforce this new code? Is this really a good use of our law enforcement resources? Are you going to monitor high school proms? I can tell you that I personally am offended when I see women wearing clothing that expose their breasts, but I am not their mother, so I have to respect the choices that those individuals and families are making. Are you going to monitor bars all around the state? What about swimming suits? Clearly, breasts are exposed when bathing suits are worn. What about Halloween parties where such artificial breasts might be part of a costume? What exactly do you mean by offended? What threshold of offended should be met before someone is dragged through our court system and has a record? On a personal note, I am greatly offended and more afraid of a display of real and fake guns than I am of the public display of fake breasts or genitalia. Unfortunately for me, guns are not declared offensive by this legislature. We do need protection for our kids, but I'm thinking maybe the tech companies that allow content that poses a great threat to our kids and society rather than a group of drag performers is a better focus. Please vote no on this bill. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mary.
I got to go back to my meeting.
Any questions? All right, no questions.
Okay, thank you.
Next up virtually is Natalie Jangula, and will be followed by Nixon Matthews. Welcome.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Start when you're ready. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Thank you, Representative Scott. My name is Natalie Jingula. I am a Nampa City Councilwoman for District 2. My address is 16817 North Darby Loop, Nampa, Idaho, 83687. I apologize that I have to do this remotely, but I appreciate the time. I am in favor of this bill. As city leaders, it's important that we represent the rights of all citizens and uphold the values of our communities. This has been increasingly challenging as we have seen cultural shifts. I will faithfully uphold the Constitution and will not infringe on anyone's rights to peacefully and lawfully assemble. However, we don't currently have legislation that helps cities uphold the values and the integrity around this controversial topic. The organizers of the Pride Fest that took place in Nampa this last year were respectful of the city's requests and did follow through on their agreements and I want to thank them for that. As we know, organizers of the events cannot control the actions of everyone who attends, and that is why that we need laws, city codes, security, and law enforcement is essential. Unfortunately, last year, we had some who did not uphold the community standards or the agreed upon requests of the event, but found that our police did not have adequate legislation in place to take appropriate action. As a city leader, I ask that you guys support this bill so that we can align our city codes with state legislation so that we don't bind the hands of our law enforcement and take action that is needed to keep our communities safe without infringing on the rights of others. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the councilwoman? See none. Thank you, Natalie. Take care.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Next up, Nixon Matthews, followed by William Mitchell.
Hello. So, good afternoon. My name is Nixon Matthews, and as I've said before, I'm a proud trans man, and I am here in strong opposition to HB 270. And I'm going to talk about three specific issues, concerns I have with this bill. First off, who defines offense? By defining offense as a measure, this bill offers no objective standard. This leaves decision-making up to personal beliefs, potentially regional standards, maybe North Idaho versus Boise versus Southeastern Idaho, or the mood of the moment. I'm going to use an example, the Idaho Shakespeare Festival. Now we've got the William Shakespeare play, Twelfth Night. It features actors dressing as another gender, a tradition in theater for centuries. If one audience member finds that offensive, should the police shut down the show and arrest the actor? And if you're thinking that is not what this bill is about, I think that actually proves the subjectivity of offense. Second, it is alarmingly broad. This bill doesn't just apply to public spaces, it specifically states any place where there is present another person. So as I've said, I'm a trans man, and I have opted to have chest surgery, top surgery. So my chest looks like a cis man's chest. If I'm shirtless in my own yard and my neighbor sees me and they find me offensive, Could they call the cops and arrest me at my own home? According to this bill and existing Idaho statute, yes, they could. Third, it imposes an extreme penalty for a nonviolent offense. 3 misdemeanors in 5 years means a felony and up to 5 years in prison. Up to 5 years in prison is the same penalty as an aggravated assault in Idaho. So in Idaho, someone who exposes their chest 3 times without harming anyone could be sentenced as harshly as a person who beats someone with a deadly weapon. So let's call this bill what it is. It is a policing bodies like mine. That's all the examples that we have heard. So I'd ask you to vote against HB 270.
Thank you, Nixon. Any questions? Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Nixon, I heard you say that that this indecent exposure statute would apply in private places. Mm-hmm. And is that are you referring to lines 16 and 17? Is that what we're talking about here?
I don't have the lines, but the specific language states any place where there is present another person. So public spaces and any place where there is present another person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nixon, my question, you talked about the Shakespeare Festival, and you said sometimes actors play the opposite sex. Would they, I mean, have you ever seen where they've used a woman actor, maybe with a big chest, and she's supposed to be a man, and so, I mean, it just wouldn't even make sense. Have you ever seen that, where they have a woman in a man's role and would have her topless?
Chairman Scott, Representative Scott, yes, that happens. There are people who play different genders across the board. And so that is something that would happen, yes.
I need to follow up there. She asked us at the end of her question that woman would be topless. You've not seen that at the Shakespeare Festival.
Topless. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman Scott. No, not topless, but this doesn't just include topless. It doesn't include exposing. This includes, and I don't have the bill sitting in front of me, so I don't remember the exact language, but it also includes items, and that could be used in a play, which would be a problem according to this bill.
Thank you. No further questions. William Mitchell.
Good afternoon, Chairman Skog and members of the committee. My name is William Mitchell. I'm representing Legal Voice. I reside in District 12, and I'm also urging your no vote today. In this short time I have, I'd like to focus on one particular concern in the bill. I invite your attention to line 11, where the new additions appear. The bill addresses a prohibition on exposing adult male breasts that look like female breasts as a result of hormones. I believe a plain reading of that provision in the bill requires us to consider a medical condition known as gynecomastia. Gynecomastia is a hormonal condition that causes enlarged breasts in males, causing breast tissue to enlarge and resembling female breasts. Gynecomastia is a surprisingly common condition. It affects up to 70% of males during puberty and as many as half of the entire male population between the ages of 50 and 80. That's according to the Mayo Clinic. What I'm trying to tell you is that the gynecomastia can happen naturally throughout the life of a male. It can also be caused by poorly managed hormonal therapies related to low testosterone in younger men, or from abuse of non-prescription or non-therapeutic use of testosterone or anabolic steroids. With that background, I hope you can see that this bill would cast among the widest of nets in our criminal code. Virtually all boys and men are at risk of criminal charges under this bill because if a guy goes shirtless up at Lucky Peak, or while floating the Boise River, or on a run around Lake Lowell, we're at risk of causing offense in someone. The condition is so common and the criminal complaint standard so low that all men would be at risk. Please vote no. Any questions?
Representative Ehart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, so you said this would potentially be a problem for all men criminally. And so since you are more adept at this than I am, if we go to line 10, And we see exposes his or her genitals, exposes, this is the exposes developed female breasts, including the aorta and nipples, sorry, I'm not pronouncing that well, exposes adult male breasts, including that have been medically or hormonally altered to appear like developing or developed female breasts. So when it says it had been medically or hormonally altered, how would that be a criminal intent for someone who had the condition of which you spoke?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ehart, I don't think we see anything in this bill about criminal intent.
Your words, though.
Oh, go through the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, those are the words he used, and that's why the question I asked specifically because he said that it would expose all men to the criminal intent and all of the criminal language he used. I'm going back through his words.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ehart, the bill itself indicates to me, and I think that's a plain reading, that just by exposing, the act merely of exposing male breasts that are affected by gynecomastia would be enough to satisfy the criminal penalties in this bill.
Follow up?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I am so sorry, what was your name again, sir? I'm sorry.
That's okay. William Mitchell is my name. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Since you again use the word criminal, according to the law or potential law, wouldn't it have to be medically or hormonally altered in order for it to be criminal? If it wasn't medically or hormonally altered, how would it be criminal?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ehart, gynecomastia is itself a hormonal condition. So if a male ends up with gynecomastia, it can happen naturally through hormonal imbalance, that's hormonally caused, or it can come from abuse of hormonal regulators like testosterone or anabolic steroids. Those are therefore hormonally caused conditions of gynecomastia.
Mr. Chairman?
One more.
One more question. But meaning that, Mr. Williams, as I read it, hormonally altered, meaning not something within the body, something that they purposely have hormonally altered. So if, I think I better understand what you were trying to say, but I just failed to see the criminal intent there. And you probably have answered what you're able to answer, but anyway, thank you. I think I just failed to see the criminal intent, but thank you.
There's no question there, so you need not respond, but we have another question from Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and William. So I'm curious what New Voice is, who you represent is, and does that have something? And I guess I'll ask the second question too. As part of this, have you been to one of these events and witnessed what the bill's intent? I mean, you heard the introduction, what this is intending to capture. Have you attended one of these events?
Mr. Chairman, and Representative Scott, two parts of your question, I believe. The first is, what is the organization known as Legal Voice? That's my employer. It's the organization I work with, and it's an organization that covers the 5 states of the Pacific Northwest, including Idaho, where I work and reside. Our organization fights and advocates for public policy positions related to gender justice. This bill fits squarely within that realm. The second question you asked is whether I've personally attended an event that would qualify or that might have conduct that qualifies here. As a matter of fact, yes, I did attend a Cher concert once where I did see conduct that would violate this criminal code.
Just a quick follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and William. Since you have attended one of these events, do you think it's appropriate to have a male that has turned himself into a female physically to be topless in front of small children?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Scott, I appreciate the question, and I think that goes outside the bill, of course, and you know that really wouldn't be a pertinent question to address the infirmities of the bill.
Follow-up.
One follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, William, I think it does. I mean, this is the problem we're trying to stop, is people putting their genitals into little children, in front of little children. So my question is that appropriate to have exposed body parts, private parts, exposed to children in these circumstances? Would you think it is or not?
You've answered already, and you don't have to respond, but you may if you like.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Representative Scott. I think I heard you say putting genitals into little children, and that I'm opposed to. Thank you.
Representative Mathias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mitchell, I just want to follow up on the back and forth with Representative Ehart. I'm looking at the language on line 12, hormonally altered. And I think this was, I just want to understand if this was the disagreement. Are you suggesting that the language is not clear enough to suggest that what this law seems to be requiring but doesn't make explicit is that such alteration needs to be intentional and voluntary on the part of the individual, and that that's not clear here?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Mathias, I think that's a great summation of what I've been trying to say, yes, is that in one case, a child who has gynecomastia may not intend to develop gynecomastia, and compare that perhaps to a man who's 25 who wants to bulk up at the gym and takes illegal steroids and ends up with gynecomastia. Now, is there an intent element there or some voluntary conduct that results in gynecomastia? Certainly some ambiguity.
Well, you got the most questions for the day.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
All right, now I forgot who I said would be next. Chante Diaz. Oh, that's virtual. Welcome back to committee. You know the drill.
Okay, my name is Chente, District 13. William Mitchell just did an amazing job covering most of what's wrong with the bill. I just want to add that I oppose it. I was at Canyon County Pride, and I know that this bill was brought about because of people who went there to harass people at Canyon County Pride, and they were offended. No clear clarification was provided of what actually happened. Could have been somebody wearing pasties, could have been a trans man just existing, could have been a butch woman with her boobs taped away, but all of those would not include areolas. This bill criminalizes exposed areolas, which this bill wouldn't even apply to. Heard Canyon County Pride is already planning on telling people to wear shirts next year, so you can be assured that this will not be an ongoing issue to be offended by. This could have been easily solved with a simple, open, honest discussion instead of trying to criminalize transgender people out of public and private spaces. Since it applies to private spaces, it will mandate businesses to be required to apply gender-based discrimination at places like public and private pools, spas, gyms, and hot springs. I know as someone who is confused for trans and as a fatty, I could easily be discriminated on my gender expression. How will someone determine what is an enhanced male breast and what is not? This bill does not answer that, but it requires that of businesses. So this bill makes businesses liable for gender-based discrimination lawsuits. With all that needless bigotry, redundancies, and legal liabilities in this bill, I ask for you to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you. See no red lights. Thanks for taking the time to testify. Alexa Lynn Phil.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for taking the time with me. I had some prepared remarks, but I wanted to mention first of all that I too was at Canyon County Pride. I am a constituent in District 10, and I don't know if that's on the good side of Nampa or not, but it certainly is a nice place to live. I was there and I saw the person with their exposed breasts and their nipples were covered. I did not appreciate it, but I don't think it rises to any level of what the bill would address for a number of different reasons. One of which, Canyon County Pride was I don't want to waste all my time on it. I do think it was maintained in as professional and as silent a way. The way that was characterized in terms of being open in an open park is incorrect. It was in an open park, but the venue was surrounded by a 6-foot fence with tenting material that you could not see through. You could not publicly see anything before you entered that, much like you must enter a business. So if you're going to prohibit people or from expressing themselves in a controlled environment like that and penalize them, will you also do that in a business, such as the bill brings up, procures, offers for sale, or whatever? Does this mean businesses that have mannequins that with exposed or nipples protruding? Is that going to be something? I think this is really not the type of well thought out bill that you want for combating what you think you're having. I also, again,
need to wrap up.
I concur with everything with regards to the subjectivity of who is responsible, who is liable for this. The penalty is grossly inaccurate.
Wrap up so we can get to everyone.
Well, obviously, I would urge you to vote against this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Seeing no questions. Eric Garanda, followed by Rachel Ann Pierce.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I think I'm on the list twice, so if I am, you can just ignore the second one, if you wouldn't mind. My name is Eric Garanda. I longtime Idahoan, longtime Christian. I'm against this bill, H270. One of the reasons why I am is because it starts out talking about developed female breasts. Now, I'm a 70-year-old straight guy. I've known some breasts in my life, not a whole lot, but all people are different. There are not two exact same breasts that I've ever noticed, and there's probably not any in this room that are exactly alike. And so what exactly is a developed female breast? That's one of those weird, who decides that? Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is I'm actually for this part. It's at the bottom where it talks about stuff that looks like genitals, human genitals. So we live in Idaho. I guarantee you there's probably 10,000 trucks with truck nuts in Idaho. Now, how do you explain this to your kids? I'm offended and embarrassed because I had to explain this to my children, why people drive around with copies of testicles hanging off their truck. So I think you should leave that one in there. I think that last line, everything else you should get rid of, except for that last line, because those truck nuts, they really offend me.
Okay, there's not to be laughter, clapping, booing, that kind of thing, because it disrupts what we're doing here today. You will be asked to be removed if you're not silent. Thank you. Go ahead and give you the lecture.
I'm sorry, sir, for being so funny, but, you know. Any questions? Thank you, committee and Mr. Chairman, for your time.
Thank you for testifying today. Rachel Ann Pierce, followed by Mike or Roseanne Matthews. They signed up as one. And then Fred Birnbaum.
Good afternoon. My name is Rachel Pierce, and I'm a resident of Boise, and I come before you to testify against House Bill 270. I strongly oppose this bill because of its entirely too broad reach and harmful language. I would like to state that some of the testimony and those sponsoring this bill have spoken on protecting children and minors, which I agree with, but this bill references absolutely no children or minors in its language. This bill suggests that not only female anatomy, but the mere representation of female anatomy is harmful and offensive. Breasts, representations of breasts, nipples, and areolas are not harmful to any person's body, be it male, female, or otherwise. The suggestion that the government must step in and tell us at what point beyond genital exposure that we can or cannot control our bodies is a dangerous line to tread. As a reminder, genitalia is defined as reproductive organs, which does not include breasts on any person. Government is here to keep our society safe, but our elected officials are not sociologists, scientists, or psychologists. This bill has no backing based in science, psychology, or criminology, leading to the conclusion that this bill is based solely on the opinions of those that sponsor it. This is not how we govern in this nation. While opinion and freedom to speak that opinion are a dearly held belief and right in this country, we reject the notion that any person must be governed solely on another person's opinion, especially when that opinion then creates a criminal record. The broad terminology of this bill leaves too much up to interpretation. In any public space where any place where there is present a person or persons who are offended is a wildly open parameter to be put into law and is deeply unsustainable. I worry for the safety of women in my community in Boise as these elected officials continue to attempt to govern our bodies. I strongly urge you to vote against this harmful, sexist, and ignorant bill. Thank you all for your time.
I'm going to mention to you that was extremely offensive to the people that brought the bill, and I hope that was not your intent. We speak badly about the bill, but not to impugn the motives of people bringing a bill, just like we don't want to impugn your motives and testimony.
Absolutely. It is not my intent to be offensive. It is my intent to be clear on wording, though.
All right. Keep that in mind if you testify again in this committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, next up, it's going to be virtual. From cold and windy Rockland, Idaho, Mike or Roseanne Matthews.
Hello.
Hi, I have two.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. I have two names on here. Is this going to be a tag team event for 2 minutes or one of you?
No, it's just one. My name is, thank you, first off. My name is Mike Matthews. I'm from Rockland, Idaho. I'm here today to oppose House Bill 270. My wife Roseanne and I believe this legislation is detrimental to our family and Idaho citizens. We're fourth generations Idahoans. We've worked, lived, and raised our family. We're proud parents of 3 sons, 2 who are of the queer community, 1 a transgender man, 1 a gay man. All 3 are well-educated, focused individuals who have good jobs and families. In reading this bill, Section A states, in any place where there is present another person or persons who are offended. We read this to mean that a neighbor or a passerby could call the police if they see someone working in their yard with their shirt off on their own private property, even to the extent of looking over a private fence. This bill blatantly allows people to attack others in their home and on their property. These are private spaces, and no one should be able to look through my window or over my fence and call police because they are offended. This bill imposes extreme penalties for nonviolent offenses. Under this law, a person could be sentenced to as severely as someone committing aggravated assault. My son could go to prison for 5 years for mowing his lawn with his shirt off. And while a person attacking my son would only go to prison for 5 years as well. It's a government-sanctioned discrimination. It is unconstitutional and it's cruel. We are concerned with how the Idaho legislature has become bogged down debating legislation designed to make the lives of specific communities harder
to the bill, please.
For people simply to try to live their best lives. These people are
Fred Birnbaum, followed by Lynette Jackson, and then Edward Clark, and that will conclude our testimonies.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Fred Birnbaum, Idaho Freedom Foundation. I stand in support of House Bill 270. The late William F. Buckley had I think, a very important saying about behavior that was not up to community standards, as long as they don't do it in the streets or frighten the horses. And I think that's really the issue here. They're doing it in the streets. They might not be frightening horses, but they're frightening children. And I think it's important to look at the bill as compared to current law. In current law, it does say willfully and lewdly. Okay, you're guilty, so I don't think cutting the lawn would necessarily apply. It also says exposes, current law, his or her genitals, and then is added, develop female breasts, including the nipple. So that's not a prom dress. I mean, at least the ones I've ever seen. I would also point out that at the very end, or near the end, in subsection 2, I'm surprised nobody brought this up, but it's actually a third time within 5 years, not a second, is guilty of a felony. And the words shall were crossed out, and now it says may be in prison for up to 5 years. So the penalties haven't been enhanced, obviously, but what this bill is about is restoring decency and community standards of behavior. And yes, we can try to come up with these scenarios, but again, currently, it says in the law, in any public place or in a place where there is present another person. So that actually exists in law right now for exposure. So that's not changing. What is changing is adding the obviously clearly underlined section where it talks about develop female breasts, including the nipple, and then obviously the medically or hormonally altered male breasts. And I think the whole gynecomastia thing, honestly, is exaggerated. I think, we realize most men as we age, we're not quite the way we were, but that's not what this bill is about, frankly, Mr. Chairman and committee.
I need you to wrap up. There may be questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wrapped up, and I'll stand for any questions.
Well, I was just curious what you were saying about how we haven't aged so well. You want to explain that further? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I might be getting, as they say, ahead of my skis. I think it's pretty obvious that men's chests at age 65 are not, even those of us that go to the gym every day, the same as age 25. That's not what this bill is about. I think there should be some seriousness here. That isn't what this bill is about. So if a middle-aged gentleman is on the river and doesn't look quite as good as he did, that's not what this bill is about. I think we should be clear about that.
Any questions? All right. Mr. Birnbaum, I think you're younger than me, I'm not sure, but when I was young, the police would cite or arrest people for being flashers. This is what's in my mind during this bill. Is this different in your mind than when we were young and there were flashers that flash people of their private parts?
Mr. Chairman, actually, I think it's an extension of that, and perhaps the difference is now this is sort of a new form of flashing, if you will. I mean, really what this is about, when people do this deliberately to offend others, what the community is saying with this bill in response to that is, we really don't appreciate it. And the reason, in my view, the language was added about the medically or hormonally altered breast to appear like female breasts is because this is actually what is happening. So when we were younger, that didn't happen. And maybe that's when the notion of flashers was just what you were describing. But this is something that has happened. It happened in Nampa. And so this is in response to that. And frankly, I would tell that community, if you kept private behavior private, nobody would care. It's the public display of behavior that shouldn't be public in the presence of children specifically, but not exclusively.
Representative Rubel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for a question. Mr. Birnbaum, if the concern is the public display, then why do you feel it's necessary for this bill to extend to private property and actions that are taken strictly in a private setting?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Rubel, that's actually in current code. So if I go to lines 16 and 17, it's not underlined. So it says in any place or in any place where there's present another person or persons. So that's in current code. And I think the intent of your question is, could this language in current code be construed to be overly broad? And I guess, is there an example, because of course this is in current code, where someone was maybe sunbathing or something and they were charged with indecent exposure. And I'm not aware of it. I have to be honest. I haven't looked into the charges, but that's in current code right now. So it's not being changed. What's being changed is the addition of the language that we've discussed.
Representative Gannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Birnbaum, when the bill was introduced, I believe there was reference to we were updating or cleaning up this particular code section. If we're doing that, why shouldn't we clean up and address where it is overly broad and applying to private homes, private backyards, and essentially private conduct?
Respond if you're able.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Gannon, I think that's a reasonable question, but it really should be addressed to the sponsor of the bill. I mean, had I written the bill, perhaps I would have done it differently, but I'm just responding to the bill as it exists with the circumstances, but that's a question you could ask the sponsor, I think.
Seeing no further red lights. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lynette Jackson, followed by Edward Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee people. My name is Lynette, and I represent as a precinct committeeman, District 12, Precinct 34. I'm very much in support of updating, because we're not creating actually new legislation, but updating current legislation to how the current societal norms are. And I feel that this bill is very common sense, and we can loophole and wonder about all the what ifs that there are, but I believe that our policemen and our prosecutors, I believe in the people that enforce law have common sense. And so some of these concerns that have been raised really we shouldn't be wrapped up in them too hard, because we have great police forces, we have judges, we have prosecutors and people that are check and balancing those things out. I would like to state that I did go to I was called and somebody said, hey, come down here and check this out. And I did go to the event at Lakeview Park last year. I was both on the outside of the event and on the inside of the event, which might be considered private, but there's this weird nuance of public-private at the same time, which there were children on the inside of these tinted walls that you've heard about. I was dismayed by the hyper-focus on both sex and children at this event. There are many reasons that we have laws, and one of them is for the protection of society. Our most vulnerable members of society are, in fact, our children. I saw nudity, and I saw sex toys being paraded around with no regard to the innocence of the children that they were being paraded in front of. I want to leave you with just one little thought, and I'm going to wrap it up really fast. If you have a child that thinks that sex talk and sex jokes and nudity and sexual prosthetics of male anatomy and other things are as harmless as a knock-knock joke or a handshake, how can we protect children from being groomed? How can we protect them from sexual exploitation? How can we teach a child what's appropriate and not appropriate when we're in here, when we can't figure it out ourselves? We need to remember that we're not just here talking to other adults, but we have laws that are there, I'm so sorry, I'll wrap up, to protect our most vulnerable, which are our children. Thank you. I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? There's someone who's at the event that brought this up, apparently. All right, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last up by virtual from Boise is Edward Clark.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
members of the committee, my name is Edward Clark. I serve as policy assistant at Idaho Family Policy Center. We stand in support of House Bill 270, and we thank the sponsors for bringing this bill forward. The Idaho State Legislature has a constitutional mandate to, quote, further all wise and well-directed efforts for the promotion of morality, end quote. Exhibitionism flies in the face of morality and tends to degrade public virtue. In the state of Idaho, recent events have highlighted how current law is inadequate to address the lewd exposure of nudity or partial nudity in public places, especially in places where innocent and unsuspecting children are present. The innocence of children is being accosted on all fronts. Parents are constantly fighting to protect their children from lewdness and vulgarity. The last thing these parents need to be concerned about is their children being exposed to lewd and provocative nudity in public parks and in the streets of their towns. The damage a child can suffer from witnessing such indecent exposure is instantaneous and irreparable. It's also worth noting, as Mr. Birnbaum already brought up, that this bill is applying to currently existing statute regarding indecent exposure, which does require that the exposure is conducted in a lewd manner. A lot of the concerns that have been brought up in testimony up to this point would not fall under this legislation because it's not being done in a lewd manner, meaning a manner that's intended to be provocative or evoke a certain response. So in order to protect our children and safeguard the well-being of our communities, I ask you to send House Bill 270 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. Thank you, and I'm now ready for any questions the committee may have for me.
Any questions? See none. Thank you for taking the time to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you have about 5 minutes maximum to wrap up. Any one of you, three of you, but keep it within 5 minutes if you would.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. As we were going through testimony, I wanted to be sure and keep note to address some vagueness or ambiguity that I didn't mention in the introduction or that we didn't mention in the introduction. I think the first point that I should have made more clear, I did attend this event. I was there in person, and what I saw was an individual that claimed to be a man with enhanced breasts from a breast enhancement, exposing the nipple and areola to children and other event attendees. That is why this bill's here today. Not hyperbole. That's what happened. That is what I personally saw and a number of individuals that testified today. That's what this bill is aiming to address and clean up and modernize, is a situation that has happened and has happened firsthand. A few comments that were made, I won't name the individuals, but just in broad sense, police's identity rather than behavior. I would argue that this is a behavior issue, not an identity issue. Individuals should not be exposing themselves, their genitals or their breasts, including nipple and areola, in public spaces. We had mentioned the portion saying altered and how an individual with a medical condition might be targeted on this issue. What we failed to address was the words thereafter, altered to appear like, given the intentionalness of the language, altered to appear like female breasts, intentionally doing so. The controlled environment issue, we heard testimony that this event had a controlled environment where there was this 6-foot wall and coverings, but it still happened in a public park. Individuals who were going in and out of the controlled area were still exposing themselves. I personally saw it within the space and outside of the space within a public park. On the enforcement side, I'd like to give a quick example, if I could, Chairman. I have to drive back and forth from Boise and Nampa, and occasionally I drive a little over the speed limit. And occasionally I get pulled over. And that officer says, "What were you doing?" And I said, "I apologize, I was driving a little fast." "You were driving a little fast, but I'm going to let you off with a warning. You know better for next time." If I continue to do it, now there's code and law in place to address bad actors. And I've been given a ticket for going over. It's addressing an issue that is in the community and how we're going to solve the problem. If I feel that citation was written egregiously, I'm going to deny those charges, and then it's going to be taken to the prosecutor's office. And then they have the duty to go through their process to ensure the situation was as it was stated by the officer. We have checks and balances to be able to address these issues. I think that's addressing all of it. Once again, I'll go back to the point. This isn't a wide and common activity, but it's an activity that's happened in our communities. Local police has stated, once again, this addition to current law would assist us in the event that we come across somebody who is exposing themselves in a manner that offends people, specifically hormonally or chemically altered breasts. The current law does not recognize this. There have been few instances in the past where this has occurred, and we've had no statutory authority. This current law is outdated and will help this issue. I stand for any questions.
Representative Mathias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I came late. I'm not sure what your name was, but the speaker, the presenter. So I'm looking at line 13, and this is the section that would pull into existing law adult male breasts that have been medically or hormonally altered to appear like developing or developed female breasts. So then I go back to line 10, where we are bringing into the statute the explicit exclusion of developed female breasts, but we are not including the developing breasts of particularly young girls. And I'm curious, what is the rationale for exempting young girls and their developing breasts from this particular proposed statute?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Mathias, thank you for the question. I think this issue is addressing adult bad actors. And in that sense, there are individuals who may have been born males who are in the process to have developed female breasts. So to add to line 13, developing or developed, it doesn't happen overnight. Individuals who are going through these hormonal transitions or surgical procedures are going to have that developing process. So that was the intent of adding that language specifically there and not on the female portion.
Follow-up?
Yeah, one follow-up. Thank you, sir. I guess my question is not about what's included, it's about what we are excluding here. Why are we essentially giving 9, 10, 11-year-old girls a pass on their exposing their developing breasts as opposed to just their subsequently developed breasts?
Chairman, Representative, I don't necessarily have a comment to address that specifically. In my opinion, we haven't had a case, and this is coming from a case of firsthand experience, so that's why it's drafted the way it is. I haven't had an issue where 11, 12-year-old children were going in parks and flashing adult individuals and offending them. I suppose in the legal sense that could have been added, but it would target an issue that's not necessarily there. This is targeting an issue that has occurred and is occurring currently.
Representative Schertz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Griffin?
Thank you.
Quick question. It goes to the punishment portion, and I may have missed this. I'm sorry, I should have played. But what's the rationale behind changing, I guess, lessening the punishment for the statute? And I guess I draw the distinction as someone who's prosecuted exposure of genitals, and it seems like now if someone exposes it, this might be an unintended consequence of this. If someone has to now expose their genitals 3 times before you get to a felony, like what was that rationale? Is that just to accompany kind of the new definitions in the statute?
Chairman, Representative Schertz, exactly that. The drafters added that portion to modernize with other code sections that have gone into the criminal code, and that is the new practice per se. I hadn't requested it. I think, once again, the whole intention of this bill is to modernize for what's current. If that's a current practice, those bill drafters are aware of that. I was not aware that that was an issue. And there was another comment made about the person or persons. That's already current code. We're going in and updating other sections of this. So it's modernizing for today's drafting practices and the issues at hand.
Okay, see no further red lights. Well,
Just a quick follow-up.
I didn't see your light.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. It's back on. I might be more confused now. So is this third time in another statute? Is this in another code? I don't know, and I'm asking that sincerely. I don't know. And I'll be supportive of the motion. I just want to I don't want to lessen our ability to hold people accountable who are, showing their genitals to other folks. I just didn't know if maybe that's encompassed in another code.
All right, currently there's no motion, but go ahead.
Chairman, Representative Schertz, I don't know the practice of the bill drafter, so I'm not aware of any other code sections that might have changed or lessened punishment areas. I just know that that's what we were given when we were given the prompt and the example. If we want to modernize it for today's day and issue. I apologize for not being able to answer that further.
Representative Hill.
Mr. Chairman, are we ready for a motion?
Motion is always in order.
I'd like to comment on my motion first.
Go ahead.
I think, number one, this is just about reasonable care in the public space. That's what this is about, reasonable care in a public place. And what is defined by the Supreme Court, it is patently offensive by contemporary community standards, and that is approved by the U.S. Supreme Court. And what is the contemporary community standards? Reasonable care. I think everyone understands that we're getting kind of stuck on gynecomastia. No. In the backyard. No. This gender roulette. I'm a girl. I'm a boy. I'm a man. I'm a woman throughout the day. No. I think it's pretty clear where we're at. I feel confident with this. So my motion, I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to send House Bill 270 to the floor with a due pass recommendation.
Any further discussion on the motion? All right. Representative Gannon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a substitute motion to send House Bill 270 to general orders, and I'll state my reasons.
Go ahead.
My concern here is with the language that applies this statute to a private home, a private patio, backyard. It's way too broad in that regard, and if we're going to update and modernize it, which is the purpose of this provision of this House Bill 270, then I think that we ought to address people's right to privacy in their own home, and we can do that on general orders.
Thank you. Noted. Any discussion on the substitute motion? I'm going to have a roll call vote because I don't hear well when people do the voice vote. Well, on the substitute motion to send to general orders, a yes is to send to general orders, a no is to not. Turn your mics on, please, when you vote.
Chairman Skog,
Yes.
Vice Chair Alfieri,
No.
Representative Scott. No. Representative Ehart,
No.
Representative Erickson,
No.
Representative Garner,
Yes.
Representative Handy,
Yes.
Representative Hawkins,
No.
Representative Hill,
No.
Representative Hostetler,
No.
Representative Pohanka,
No.
Representative Schertz,
No.
Representative Gannon,
Yes.
Representative Mathias,
Yes.
Representative Rubel,
Yes.
Motion fails 6-9. Now we go to the original motion to send House Bill 270 to the floor with a due pass recommendation. We'll also do a roll call vote.
Chairman Skog,
Yes.
Vice Chair Alfieri,
Yes.
Representative Scott, yes. Representative Ehart,
Yes.
Representative Erickson,
Yes.
Representative Garner,
Yes.
Representative Handy,
Yes.
Representative Hawkins,
Yes.
Representative Hill,
Yes.
Representative Hostetler,
Yes.
Representative Pohanka,
Yes.
Representative Schertz,
Yes.
Representative Gannon, Representative Mathias,
No.
Representative Rubel,
motion carries 12-3. Thank you, committee. That concludes our business for the day.
This bill, I think, puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.